Our efforts were always designed to feel invisible because the kind of people we wanted to attract, developers, are allergic to marketing. This can't feel like an influencer on Instagram hawking a vitamin water with hashtag ad. If anything feels like marketing, these people are going to have an allergic reaction and go away.
Hey, welcome to Next Meta, a podcast and a newsletter about on-chain economies, coordination, most effective tactics, and the bigger picture. Serious topics and a not-so-serious host. Hope you enjoy. Welcome, Amanda, to the Next Meta podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I met Amanda at Ethereum New York back in 2019, where she was one of the main organizers as the CMO of ConsenSys. And were you the youngest C-level person at ConsenSys at the time?
Definitely.
Okay, cool. And now she's working on Serotonin, which is a marketing agency and a product studio, with which she will talk a lot more about later. But yeah, let's start with how did you get yourself into this mess, especially that early? So you started at ConsenSys in 2015, you said?
Yeah, so I started working on the Ethereum project in 2015. I joined ConsenSys and took on the CMO role officially in 2016. Basically, I had this startup called Slant from my previous media career that I'd started in on after university. And we were trying to be decentralized media before it was really possible on a blockchain. And we were running into all kinds of issues with payment processing and third parties. And so I started going to meetups all around New York and trying to meet people that knew about payments. And I was always interested in futuristic and cutting edge tech. And I was moving in circles of founders and builders and creators that were trying to find out about the newest things. And so I stumbled upon a very early Ethereum meetup, was completely blown away. I wasn't able to, with my media and marketing background, diligence the open source code base myself, but I could diligence the people. And I was so struck by the concentration of ultra smart people who were the most excited I've ever seen a group of ultra smart people. And I realized that I would have to pester them with questions until I got my head around the thing that they were building. And once I did, it exploded my mind, and I realized I needed to drop everything I was doing and join the circus. I also felt really fortunate because although these are some of the best kind of engineering, economics, software builder minds that I'd ever encountered, there wasn't as much knowledge about media and marketing and English language storytelling amongst that group. And so I felt like with my background, I could really contribute something to the movement that wasn't an emphasis before, that would contribute something different. And so then I was helping out with that group of people. The roles and company and ConsenSys were getting clearer, and I interviewed with Joe, and he invited me to join the company as Chief Marketing Officer. And so I got started with that in 2016.
Okay, cool. And so when it was still 2015 when you started going to these meetups?
Yes, I went to my first Ethereum meetup, I think in 2015.
Cool. Yeah, that must have been crazy. Like you could talk to all of these people like Vitalik or Joe Lubin and whoever, and there were not like 10 other people trying to pull them in other directions. And yeah, they weren't so extremely busy that it was impossible to talk to them.
Yeah, it's very cool. I mean, in my intro, you mentioned that I was probably the youngest exec at ConsenSys. And I sometimes get the question of how I became CMO of ConsenSys when I was 25. And the answer is because no one else was trying to be. We always kind of project the present onto the past. And today, I think a lot of people would want a role like that. And today, what happened with Ethereum feels inevitable. But the truth was, early on, there weren't really that many people excited about it yet. There was a really essential, high quality core formed, but it wasn't the phenomenon it is today. And so there wasn't a lot of competition for that job.
Right. But yeah, you said you were trying to build a decentralized publishing or decentralized media before that. So like, how did you? Yeah, so you learn about the blockchain before you learn about all of this, or yeah, how did that drew you in?
So that word decentralized has existed before the blockchain, and I wasn't using the blockchain. I'd worked
Okay.
at Huffington Post, and I worked for Ariana Huffington, and a lot of what was driving traffic back then in their business model was the blog platform. And the deal that HuffPost made with bloggers was bloggers submit their content. If that content performs well and gets featured on the website near the top or on the social media channels of the company, then the author could get a lot of exposure. What that blog platform didn't do was pay the creators anything. And as a young creator, I thought I wanted to be a journalist originally. So, as a young creator coming out of university, I thought there has to be a better way to enable emerging creators to get paid for their work, especially when some of their work, certainly not all, but some portion of it, is actually generating a lot of financial value through the advertising business model. And so I started this company called Slant, basically as a way to pay creators with micropayments.
Mhm.
70% of the value that they generated from content and the ads that we served against it. But in order to pay out our creators, we ended up splitting the dollar and sometimes splitting the cent. And so even though our business model worked in theory and our platform was blowing up, we very quickly grew to 4 million readers per month, which was wild and really fast, because our incentive system worked.
Mm.
Despite that, the financials didn't really make sense because we were paying out to these third-party processors sometimes more than we were even making on a given transaction. And so that got me thinking, maybe there's some sort of technology or some sort of mechanism for making all of these business models that are logical in theory actually work in practice.
Right. And then you stumbled upon the blockchain. All right, and then so you started going to these early meetups, and what was it other than these like the payment solutions? What was it that really like drew you into this the world of crypto? Any other like
I, I
promising
came
use
I
cases?
came looking for a solution to my random startups problem, and I left with a new foundational architecture for the world systems. um,
Right.
so I kind of got more than I bargained for. I expected to come and find a solution for the problem I was having. Instead, I ended up dropping everything I was doing and coming to work on this new platform. The thing that really struck me about it, when I was growing up, I would ask my grandmother what I should do when I grow up. And I had all these ideas, like I wanted to really change how our world systems work, really wanted to make them better. And I remember her telling me that there's no way to do that, that the system we're in is just the system we'll always be in. The incumbents are around the table already, they always win. And so you might as well figure out a way to join them. And to me, that was just the most depressing thing. And I watched at big companies these very calcified economic hierarchies. Older people were staying in their jobs longer and not retiring. A lot of these companies weren't really growing anymore. No matter how hardworking and smart you were, you have to wait to climb up the ladder. There's no way for drive and intelligence to actually break through economically. And so we have this calcified economic structure. We have this calcified way of thinking where you assume that you can't change anything. And when I encountered Ethereum, it met my need and my desire for a way to break through, for a way to deploy intelligence and hard work to break through these structures that I was continuously told were unbreakable. And I think that kernel of inspiration is what inspired others as well to join the Ethereum movement. The core premise of techno optimism, that we believe it's possible to use technology to re-architect the world's systems and improve them. And ultimately, that's what I wanted to communicate when I was responsible for communicating to the world about what Ethereum was, not just the architecture and how the technology works and what it is, that too, but also that sense of inspiration and breaking through.
Right. Yeah. So on one hand, it was like it was giving you the opportunity to break through and like empowering you, but on the other hand, it's also like about yeah, basically allowing anybody to try to reshape or rebuild the whole world system. So
Yeah.
yeah.
The other thing I love, the other paradigm I love is, and this is true of Bitcoin as well as Ethereum, there's always this idea that you're either virtuous, and virtuous is defined as you give away your wealth to others, you're charitable, you donate, or you're selfish. And if you're selfish, that means you try to extract maximum rewards for yourself and you don't care about others. And that always felt too binary and too simplistic for me. And what I love about the conceit of Bitcoin that I learned about at that time, and then proof of work Ethereum, and it's true of proof of stake too, is whenever you get that false binary, you're actually just in a bad system. And you have to redesign it at the system level in order to co incentivize communitarian and individualistic goals so that you don't have to depend on humans being virtuous or on human nature suddenly being different, and you don't have to finger wag and depend on moralizing. Instead, you just create a system that actually incentivizes the outcomes that you want.
Right. Yeah. Otherwise, you just end up going this direction where the sociopaths keep on rising to the top.
Totally.
Okay, and yeah, so like you started going to these meetups, your mind was blown. You started meeting all of these cool people, and then kind of suddenly you found yourself in the CMO position of ConsenSys. Like, how did that transition work? And yeah,
I just asked Joe if I could be CMO, and he said yes. That's how the transition worked.
okay, and so yeah, you said that this was already after the Ethereum ICO. And so the Ethereum ICO, if I'm not wrong, the communications, the marketing was led by Vinay Gupta. This, for people who don't know him, this older guy, really cypherpunk technologist. Uh, I don't think he's really a marketing expert, but yeah, he came up with this world computer meme. I don't know if it was just him, but that was the narrative at the time. Like when Ethereum ICO launched, the video was like Ethereum is the world computer. How did you feel about that, and like what sort of direction did you take it next? Because like as you said, like, the Ethereum Foundation didn't have a marketing department or anything like that, so ConsenSys was the marketing for Ethereum and building the applications on top of Ethereum. So yeah,
Yeah, I
multiple
mean,
threads,
I,
but
I can't speak to marketing work that was done before me. I can't speak to whether the Ethereum ICO was marketed well or poorly. Like today, the fact that something around $16 million worth of capital wanted to buy 30-cent ETH tokens is mesmerizing. I love that that group wasn't composed of the giant VCs. I love the diversity in that group and how small each of the participants was. I think I read a stat that Ethereum created more individual millionaires than any technology ever. It didn't create the most value total of any technology ever, but it created the most individual millionaires. And that shows you how small and diverse the participants in that ICO were. And I think that ended up sending Ethereum on a very cool path. Do I think that if it had been marketed better, they would have been able to raise more money? Maybe. It's unknowable what's possible. The narratives that I came in with, like, and you have to get rid of today's narratives for a minute and think about the narratives that were in the market at the time. We were explaining something to people that they'd never heard of before. And the only thing we could compare it to was Bitcoin, because they'd heard of Bitcoin, mostly because of Silk Road. And so a lot of the messaging around Ethereum is intentionally, and even some of the branding and visuals that we use were intentionally very light and bright to be in contrast with the kind of heavy darkness of Bitcoin that was being associated with Silk Road and drugs and illegal activity. So we were trying to make this more bright, more positive, hopeful, futuristic. So you can see some of the contrast there, even visually. In terms of, so we had to describe it at the beginning in order to really have the message resonate by comparing it to something you already know, and that thing is Bitcoin. So what we would say is something like, Bitcoin is like email and Ethereum is like the App Store. Or we would say things like, comparing Bitcoin and Ethereum isn't comparing apples to oranges. It's like comparing apples to a computer. Bitcoin created the first decentralized money system that's secure, permissionless, cryptographic, but it's really designed to just move coins around a ledger, right? It's not designed for applications. And if we want to re-architect our economy from the ground up in a natively digital, decentralized kind of context, then we're going to have to use a technology that's actually a Turing-complete computing language to do it, because people are going to want to build sophisticated applications. They're going to want to build financial products similar and also different to what we have in the traditional system. And that's why we need Ethereum. So it was those kinds of narratives that I started with, because at the beginning, we had to link back to something, breadcrumb back to something that people found, legible. For technologists, a phrase that would resonate really well is virtual machine. That means something. Means something to people, and that's something we used quite a bit. Then over time, the narratives are so funny. Like, the reason we started using the word blockchain, and it really was us that popularized it that much. There's this kind of Darwinian evolutionary mechanism for selecting words and phrases, right? They get selected for when they're useful, and they get selected against when they're not useful. So at the time, at ConsenSys, we were trying to drive enterprises to adopt blockchain, and most enterprises couldn't get their mind around the idea that they would ever use crypto or have crypto on the balance sheet. So we started using this word blockchain in order to separate out the technology from the currency. And that's why that word gets used so much. And also to make the comparison to Bitcoin. It's like, well, Bitcoin is a blockchain. This is a different blockchain. But now that term isn't being selected for in the Darwinian evolution of terms, and serves it right, because it's turned out that true enterprise and institutional adoption is on a public blockchain, and it's with crypto. And so we don't really need to separate out that underlying anymore. And so that now that term's been selected against. So there are so many interesting terms and phrases. Another one that we came up with BIDDLE, which was during a
Oh,
little
really?
downturn. We wanted to focus people on building applications, because Ethereum, unlike Bitcoin, the way that we grow the value, this is how we were thinking about it then, and it's how we think about it now, and it's how all the other ecosystems have copied thinking about it, which is developers. You market to developers, you build developer community, you attract developers, you educate developers, you give grants, you give funding. Everything's about developers because that gives you more at-bats to build more applications. And so we wanted to emphasize that the way we add value, and I mean economic value here, is by building, not just by holding onto some asset like the Bitcoin community. And so that's why we made BIDDLE as a contrast to HODL. So we've created a lot of these kind of paradigms over time.
Love it. Yeah, the cultural difference that it felt like, to me at least, from Bitcoin to Ethereum, is like Bitcoin felt like reactive to the current system, and we have this new currency, and it's like we're very cypherpunk and we're gonna disconnect from the world. Whereas Ethereum was a lot more like you said, like bright and optimistic, and was about building a new system. So that's what drew me in personally. But what was I gonna say? Can you give some examples of the marketing campaigns or outreach campaigns that you did with these narratives?
Totally. So I hear this from people all the time. Actually, I heard from I was in a meeting. It was someone who runs the foundation of one of the very largest L1s that is not Ethereum. I will not mention what it was, but this person said, well, Ethereum got to where it is without any marketing. Why can't we get to that same place without any marketing? Our efforts were always designed to feel invisible, because the kind of people we wanted to attract, developers, are allergic to marketing. This can't feel like an influencer on Instagram hawking a vitamin water with hashtag ad. If anything feels like marketing, these people are going to have an allergic reaction and go away. And so what we
Right.
did was something completely different, which is we got back to the growth hacker roots of marketing. We focused on, okay, what are the outcomes we want to achieve in the world? More developers building. And what do we need to do in order to achieve those outcomes? Running an ad, running a paid campaign is this really calcified marketing skill set that didn't work for what we were trying to do, and we didn't try it. And today, there are a lot of paid campaigns running for various products, but the space is more mature, and so it makes sense that that's the case. But at the time, we needed to attract people to the movement for more kind of genuine personal reasons. Also, you couldn't even run ads at the time using crypto keywords because they were all banned. I don't know if people remember this, but 2016, 2017, you couldn't say crypto, blockchain, Bitcoin, ETH in any kind of ad. People were getting kicked out of their MailChimp accounts. This wasn't just Facebook and Google. It was all kinds of different things. It was really wild. And so what we did, the most effective thing we ever did, we organized the organizers. So we created a global network of meetup leaders. We made sure they had access to standardized materials and language if they wanted it. We made sure they had money for pizza and beer or the culturally relevant equivalent. We fostered this community where they could talk to each other and coordinate with each other. We didn't try to top-down control the content, but what we did was curate bottom-up a roving series of new dApps that could come and tour all the different meetup groups all over the world, and they could get feedback, and then there'd be always access to fresh content for the actual people going to the groups. You could go to an Ethereum meetup at least once a week and some kind of crypto meetup every night in the major tech hub cities, and you could go to something at least monthly in almost every major city around the world, which was totally wild. And so we organized the organizers. we saw it as our role not to do everything ourselves, not to determine what everything would be like, but to see ourselves as facilitators. And that's always what I recommend to people that are marketing decentralized things to decentralized communities. Be observant, be a noticer, look at what people are doing naturally, look at where the oxygen is, and then you're blowing fire onto the oxygen where it is, rather than having to come up with all the ideas yourself.
Makes sense. So you guys were a big part of the reason that there were so many local Ethereum meetups.
Exactly.
The invisible work. That's cool to know. Like I did not know you did so much work around like engaging builders, because like nowadays ConsenSys gets a lot of flack for like, oh, ConsenSys was always aiming for institutional adoptions, and like some of the institutions are not good actors in the space, blah blah blah. But
I
that
can
sounds
speak
like
to
it's
that. I
not
can
really.
speak to that a lot, but like I'm probably violating some NDA right now. Who knows? But like, I worked there before they even had those documents, I think. But so early on, the Ethereum Foundation and ConsenSys shared dev teams and resources, and the mission was different early on when I worked at ConsenSys. And I served in my role from 2016 through 2019 for 4 years, like the first 4 years. And the mission was to bring Ethereum to market, and to grow Ethereum, to get Ethereum out there, to get people building on it, to get people excited about it. Over time, certain tools at ConsenSys got product market fit, and ConsenSys narrowed its focus to product marketing for those products, and took in a bunch of funding from big companies, partners, funds. It did that narrowing and made that change partly because mission accomplished. It was successful in getting Ethereum to market and showcasing what Ethereum was capable of. And it needed to change its focus. It couldn't have kept that same focus because the project was complete. And that's when I left. I wasn't that interested in becoming a product marketer for MetaMask. I love the product. I think it's cool. I think it's brought a lot of people into the ecosystem. But what I wanted to be doing and what my teammates wanted to be doing was painting with a broader brush and growing adoption of truly decentralized Web3 products. And at that point, the way to do it was going outside of ConsenSys.
Okay. So that was the main reason you left. Like there was no like internal conflict or anything like that that
I
got you
mean,
away. I mean, there's always some internal conflict, but yeah.
so that is kind of an internal conflict, right? Like I wanted to be involved in growing Ethereum and growing the decentralized world. And I felt like the management of that company was becoming more corporate and corporatized and focusing on institutions which weren't adopting crypto yet. And so that didn't make sense. And hiring more people with very traditional finance and consulting kinds of backgrounds instead of builders. And also, I wanted to keep my mission broad. So, yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. And you said this was already 2019?
So that was 2019. I I left ConsenSys and I started doing the work that would lead to Serotonin. So Serotonin never raised any funds. It wasn't bootstrapped. It was just profitable from day one. I started with a couple of clients, helping them with marketing, basically applying the best practices that our team had created to the next generation of L1s, L2s, DAOs, DeFi, NFTs, Web3 utilities, then expanded into Web2 companies coming into Web3. So started with Sotheby's and then Robinhood, PayPal, now Van Eck. So we work with a lot of the big folks that are coming in. And I gradually rehired a lot of my original team into our profit margins. So whenever we had enough money, I would try to hire my favorite former teammates, and also a bunch of people that were new. And Serotonin's now been around 4 years. We're about 100 people. It's concentrated in New York, Los Angeles, London, and Hong Kong, which is where I'm living these days, really growing in Asia right now. And we started with marketing. So that's PR, content, social, community, events, paid growth marketing, and KOLs. We now have this kind of east to west, west to east practice. Then we expanded into recruiting. We also got into legal and compliance, strategy, so helping Web2 companies transform into Web3. And then we've used our profits to build one software project every year.
If you're listening to this episode and you like this episode, you should consider minting this episode. So we started uploading this podcast to pods.media. You can find a link to this episode in the show notes. And it will really help us a lot if you just went on there and minted this episode. And if you do not want to mint this episode, what you can help with is sending your favorite quote. Like if there's anything mind-blowing or super interesting that you heard in this episode, just comment that quote in the comments of whatever platform that you're listening this on. Thank you. Yeah, go on. Let's hear more about the project. Like, I love that how you started with this basically one service and then expanded into building products, and now you
So it's
kind of have this whole
actually
ecosystem and over 100
inspired.
people.
Thank you. It's actually inspired by like the Warren Buffett Berkshire Hathaway model. So like what Warren Buffett wrote is you need one entity to be the cash flowing core of the business. So because you need cash flows. And then you take those cash flows and you invest them in higher risk, higher potential reward opportunities. So at Serotonin, the services business that has product market fit, it's not a startup, it's post startup at this point. That thing generates cash flows, it's growing, and then we can invest those cash flows in building riskier, potentially more rewarding, scalable things. So the first one was Mojito, which is the backend for selling Web3 digital goods, NFTs, that like Sotheby's, Pace Gallery, Mercedes, others use. Then the next year we built Franklin, which is Web3ifying the back office. So it lets you pay your team in crypto or in cash in a tax compliant way. Basically like a JustWorks or Gusto, but on Web3 rails. Then last year we built the Serotonin platform. And actually, little call to action, if that's not annoying. If you go to serotonin.co/platform, you can sign up for that and get it for free right now, which is access to a bunch of resources, network, events in the space. It's pretty cool. And then this year, we're actually building something on the TON blockchain on Telegram, and it's an advertising suite.
Okay, can you how far out is that?
It's what month is it? It's August right now. I kind of want to have it live by the end of the year, and my goal is for it to let crypto marketers launch ads on Telegram and get high quality analytics on the performance of those ads in a way that is wallet aware. Wallet aware is a term that we coined at Serotonin along with our partners at Spindle. Spindle is the leading Web3 marketing tech company started by Antonio Garcia, actually, who built the original Facebook ad product. Very, very cool historical guy. But so we've coined this term wallet awareness, which is interesting. So in marketing, right now you can see Web2 style stats on how you're doing, or you can look on chain and see what kind of impacts your activities are having on chain. But there's no full 360 vision way to do attribution of a campaign and see how it's impacting the things that are happening both in Web2 and also on chain. And that's the gap that we're filling with wallet awareness.
Got it. And that why you chose the Ton blockchain for the integration with the Telegram messaging
So
app?
the Web3 marketing software stack that we've been building with Spindle is wallet aware, and it enables marketers to get that level of data. The reason we're applying that stack to Ton, and we'll also apply it to every other type of inventory that exists, right? If you think of Telegram, it's ad inventory, like that's space that has people's attention. And so we're applying this idea of wallet awareness and the Web3 marketing stack that we're building to Telegram and bringing it to the Ton blockchain because there's a lot of inventory in there. And that inventory currently isn't being utilized. So if you look at Meta or if you look at Google, even though they've come out with so many different things, a huge portion of their total revenue is from advertising, maybe like 80 something percent, 90 something percent. Telegram has built all of the pieces of that except for the ad suite. And so we thought, by partnering with them, we could introduce that. And maybe we can also improve advertising. So imagine if you could log in and make a pseudonymous Telegram account by proving that you own the private key that corresponds with a certain public key. And then you could opt to turn on receiving messages so that anyone that wants to, let's say, send an airdrop to that address can reach out to you with something that you actually want, an airdrop, as a mechanism to market the thing that they're doing. What if we can change advertising to be about opting in and getting access to things that you want and getting paid to actually look at things and do things only if you've opted in, rather than the model that we have in Web 2. What we're building enables that.
Okay, I love it. And it's really related to the next question that I wanted to ask you, which is, so what do you think is this future of Web3 marketing? Like, how do you see developing? Like you said, it's kind of different from Web2 in that it relies a lot less on ads. But yeah, as the
Well,
space matures, there's more usage of ads. Yeah, I'll just
yeah, so
let you
it's
speak.
changing. So basically, like early on, when a lot of the products were very early, it made sense to only use owned and earned channels. So owned channels are like your own website, your own blog, your own social media accounts. Earned are when someone else lets you borrow their traffic from their website, their traffic from their social media accounts. Let's say a partner retweets you, or let's say an event has you as a speaker, or let's say a media outlet covers you. You have earned getting to reach their audience and being on their channel. And so when products are early, when communities are early, we tend to suggest more owned and earned style tactics. But once you have a mature product and once you have a cash register, once people are paying for it, then it makes sense to test different channels, different inventory, and see whether you can get margins on the difference between the cost to acquire the customer and the lifetime value of the customer. And your revenue, your net revenue, comes out of those margins. And unless you can actually measure those two things, unless you have a product live, it doesn't really make sense to do paid growth marketing. But once that ROI calculus is possible to do, then it makes sense. And so as our space gets more mature and has more and more products that meet that bar for different reasons in different ways, we'll see more paid marketing. We're also seeing a convergence of strategies between East and West that I think is really interesting, which is part of the reason why we've been growing so much in Asia and why I've been learning so much here in Asia. We're seeing a lot of KOL-driven marketing increasingly. That's coming from Asia, but it's been coming to the West. And then conversely, what I think is going to start coming to Asia and really from the West is authenticity and having messages that aren't bought and paid for, having editorial media that's not sponsored. having, putting value on judgment that's not bought and paid for. And so I think that both styles, both the Shenzhen playbook and the Silicon Valley playbook for crypto, have things to teach each other.
Right. And recently read a tweet by Peter Pan that was like talking about how it's also different because Web3 products kind of inherently require more trust because you can lose money. And so that's part of the reason why they're trending away from ads and more towards like community spreading the message about your product and stuff like that. What do you think about these like community-based strategies and how well do they work? Like having the community spread the message.
It depends what you want. If you want to gather builders who actually care about your technology, who care about your product, that's how you need to do it. It needs to be a bottoms-up, community-focused effort. You can certainly add extrinsic rewards to the mix. Let's not pretend that we're monks, right? Like what we were talking about at the very beginning. The mixture of intrinsic and extrinsic incentives definitely reward people for building using the technology. Definitely reward your early users, but reward them for actually using it. Reward them for actually building, as opposed to having people do these really cosmetic things, like just join a channel or just retweet a post and them getting rewarded for that. So think really carefully about the incentive system you're building. If you offer everybody a free $100 to follow your account, you're going to have a lot of followers very quickly. You're going to have a lot of community members very quickly. But are those the ones you want? And the answer to that question depends on thinking really hard about what you want, not just next week, not just next month, but in 5 years.
Right. Yeah, I think it also relates to what you previously said, like starting with this more like internally driven, and then as you scale and the cost of acquisition and all of that like starts making more sense, then you can start investing more in paid marketing, which include like these big attention gaining campaigns, which like if you do it right away, it will hurt you because you will have a lot of empty followers. But maybe if you have a strong base already, it's probably a lot more helpful.
I think also genuinely trying to get product market fit, that's a message that we've been trying to spread everywhere. There's this idea in some crypto circles that have been so influenced by the KOL movement, and I understand how they've gotten this way, but people have started to believe that there's some kind of fake it tactic that works, where you don't actually have to build a product or get product market fit. And if you want to go play with financial nihilism, if you want to go play with meme coins, great. Go do that and do it explicitly. But if you're building technology, if you're building a product that you want people to use, then you have to go look for product market fit. And there are some great books and resources on this. You can read 0 to 1. You can read The Lean Startup. Those methods work.
Right. Yeah. Before we move on, I wanted to say, like, yeah, really impressive what you built. Like, yeah, like most projects in the space really raise money first and then start building and all that. But you really started with the service and had the cash flow first, and how you're building all of the products. Yeah, I think you're setting a great example.
Thank you.
But yeah, you touched on something here with the way that projects are building and not caring so much about product market fit and thinking they can spend their way or like airdrop tease their way into adoption. And it kind of relates to the question that I wanted to ask you previously, like going back to the ICOs era and how the space has changed since then, like with the ICOs that were available to anybody, and then this move towards private deals and projects trying to impress VCs with inflated metrics so they can raise even more money. But let's start with like the ICO era. Like, what did you like about that time of crypto history? So that was like 2016. up until like
I,
2017.
Yeah, so I'm going to compare this to building the railroads in America. And if you look at the history of building the railroads, there were a lot of things that kind of looked like ICOs. People would invest a lot of money. People were very excited. The future was so bright and had so much potential. It was this new kind of technology that would become foundational, that would change everything. Um, and then over time, certain projects succeeded, certain projects blew up spectacularly, and it turned out all the investors had gotten completely defrauded. There were bubbles. Then there was a period where the railroad industry got taken over by cabals, by mafiosos that were rent seeking and extracting. And then over time, railroad shipping matured to the point where it got commoditized, and full price discovery happened. And now shipping costs between railroads are very competitive. It's a very clear, open market for how it works. It's subsidized in certain places by government. So it went through these cycles. And that's exactly what's happened in crypto. So I've lived through the part of the cycle where we're first telling the story about railroads. Oh my goodness, we're going to be able to cross the whole continent and bring a bunch of freight with us. Let's all invest. Very exciting time, very equal opportunity. Anybody could invest. Young people could make generational wealth. It was so new. By getting into it, by finding out about it early, by understanding it and making the right investment, you could really make a killing. Then a bunch of building happens. Some of those things that get built are valuable. Some of them blow up horrifically. There are concerns that the whole industry is a fraud, that the whole industry is a bubble, that it's not real, that, coast to coast rails don't exist and are just a fiction. And then you get some capture, right? So the centralized exchanges have some capture, the market makers have some capture, the VCs have some capture. That's the period we're in right now. We're in the period of some capture by cabals, and all of these tokens, most of the tokens that you see coming out now, a bunch of VCs have pre-bought for very low prices. A lot of them are not very transparent about when those VCs have their tokens unlocked. A lot of them are dumping on a retail buyer. So a young person getting into buying tokens today could do all the research in the world and buy tokens of a project, building really great technology with a great team behind it. You can look on GitHub and diligence the code yourself. And then because of some opaque, unseen dynamic among VCs or among market makers, something bad or unexpected or illogical, given the publicly transparent signals, could happen with the price of that token. And that's one of the big changes. And I'm working on some mechanisms to try to address this. I want to come up with a new version of fair launches where people only get tokens proportional to how long they're willing to lock them up, similar to a curve lock drop. So you create a more staggered unlock schedule instead of these dramatic unlocks, and you have everyone play by the same rules. So there are no secret whales that are suddenly going to dump on the market. I think like I'm a techno optimist. I believe we can use technology to fix problems. I think we can use Web3 tech to fix the non-transparency problem that we've gotten in token launches right now. But that's where I think we are, and I think we can fix it.
Okay. And what did you? I guess what you like the most is the open access to everybody in the previous era.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, right. So like we already have a stock market with secret rules and secret dealings. The whole idea with the open system we're building is that you can go look at the code for everything. You can do your own research with publicly available information and learn everything you need to know about what's going to happen. And right now, the opaqueness around the centralized exchange listing process, the opaqueness around activities of market makers, the opaqueness around VCs, the prices they get in at, their unlock schedules, is making it look a lot more like the normal market. I want this to be a different looking market, and for young people like what I was like in my 20s to have the opportunity now that I had with Ethereum.
Right. Yeah, it's these days feels like it's almost impossible because yeah, like all the deals have shifted to VCs, and then the only things that people can actually enter at like very early valuations are the meme coins, and then like 99.9% of those meme coins are also rug pulls. So yeah, it's a
Totally, but I think we can
tough.
fix it. I think we can use this technology to fix this problem that you and I agree exists and that you and I have both identified. I think we can do it.
I hope so. Do you see any way to help with this? So from the like the regulatory side,
No, I don't.
no hope.
I think the,
Yeah.
there are two things that I like about regulation. One is it creates the sense of safety necessary for more institutions to get into the space. And that's good for everyone that's currently in the space. People that are anti-institutions coming in and buying crypto should read their crypto history. The thing that really popped the Ethereum token at first was the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance in February 2017. It's been institutions and enterprises and also builders and creators this whole time. It's been heterogeneous. It's always been a mix. And so it's a good thing to have those institutions feel safe to come in. We want to be welcoming. And then the other good thing is they're making distinctions between centralized and decentralized projects, or some proposed regulation is, some isn't, which is horrible. But the centralized entities, things that are custodying funds for other people, should be treated like banks. Like the thing that SBF did, that FTX did, was already illegal. They didn't do a weird crypto thing. They did a totally traditional thing. That's always been
Right.
illegal. And I don't want people getting confused that that type of activity has anything to do with crypto and decentralized projects. It doesn't. So having that clarity, having that differentiation between, okay, you should be able to really do almost whatever you want and have infinite leeway if you're not custodying anybody's funds, but you should be regulated like a bank if you're custodying people's funds. So that's the good distinction that regulation has the opportunity to make.
Right. And do you think they're gonna uh, yeah, start going in this better direction versus like these blanket ways that they've been applying so far, just like pretty much saving people from airdrops, receiving airdrops, and preventing people from fair launching tokens? Do you see any
Well,
hope on that side?
I'm building technology for letting people opt into airdrops and fair launching more kinds of things. So I guess it depends who they is, right? It depends who we elect as our leaders. It depends who we put in charge.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, we could get deeper into that, but I don't want to get into politics and be another place where people talk about the US elections. Let's not do that. What was I gonna say? So let's see if I missed any
I agree.
important questions. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, actually, what is something that people don't agree with you on in terms of marketing in the space, or not necessarily just marketing, but yeah.
I basically think that if your product involves doing a Web3 feeling thing, you really can only market it to people that are already in Web3. I get some flack about that because a lot of projects observe, they make the really thoughtful observation that more people and more capital are not in Web3 than in Web3. So they think, let's go after all that. But it's way easier to market to people that already habitually do the activity that you want them to do than to try to teach someone how to do something new. So my advice to all projects, if your project involves doing something that feels like Web3, it should be marketed to Web3 people, and let the big centralized exchanges with billion-dollar marketing budgets pay all the money to convert people to have their first Web3 experience. And then you can grab them on the flip side once they're ready to have their 10th Web3 experience and they're a little bit trained up.
Right. Well said. Yeah, I was in the first bucket up until less than a year ago with Metagame. I was trying to onboard the normies, but then realized, okay, no, we should be just focusing on people who are already here and helping them. And yeah, I saw your tweet the other day about this, like letting the exchanges handle that part, and I think it makes sense. And yeah, the very final question is, what's the meta? So this is the question that I ask every podcast guest. And the meta can be like the bigger picture, or it can be like the most effective tactic available in some specific domain. Up to you.
I think the meta is going to, one meta for marketing right now is, I think a lot of big infrastructure projects got funded in the United States because that's where a lot of the deepest pocketed VCs are. But now they're really hungry for applications and games and users. And the game builders, application builders, potential users in the US and European world are so saturated and so over-marketed to that those projects are realizing they need to come to Asia for those things and also other parts of the world. And then on the flip side, a lot of the lower cost of living markets that have a lot of young people, have a lot of developers, have great gaming industries, places here in Asia, such as, Vietnam, the Philippines, Thailand. Those are great places to actually pick up users and build applications and create games. And so I think similar to the internet, where a lot of the infrastructure originally came from the US, but a lot of the most popular applications came from elsewhere, especially Asia. I think we're going to have a similar phenomenon where we're going to see applications and games and users come from markets where it's cheaper and easier to rapidly iterate on ideas and to have a nearby mobile first population that's more willing to adopt something new. And so I think there's going to be a really interesting east-west, west-east collaboration going on this cycle that we've really set ourselves up at Serotonin to help facilitate.
Right. I like it. Yeah, for the price of one full-time developer in the US, you can basically get like 5 of them in Thailand or Philippines, places like that. And yeah, there's a lot of talent coming out from other sides of the world, especially in this decentralized world. I like that. Cool. Any other than that, any closing thoughts?
I have to run. I have to jump into a meeting, but thank you so much for
All
having
right.
me. This has been an absolute
Thank
pleasure.
you. Thank you for coming on, and we'll
Thank
see you
you.
around.
Perfect. Thanks. Bye.